Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I am back with more Battlytics excitement. In the lab here, running some numbers. Tonight we're looking at a Wave 2 redesign, and it's one of the coolest ones, I think. It is the Nightstar. So this is a 95-ton inner sphere beast of a mech. Has some really cool history and, in my opinion, has an extremely solid loadout. So really excited to run this one through the gauntlet. So guys, don't go anywhere. Numbers are coming right at you. All right, here we are, the Nightstar NSR-9FC. So this thing, again, 95 tons, inner sphere assault mech. This mech has really cool history. So when you look at the mech, especially the redesign, which is absolutely phenomenal, it does look very much like a Marauder. And if you read up on the history of this mech, the genesis of it is actually during the Aries Civil War. I guess a lot of the commanders were piloting Marauders and, getting gunned down, so they needed something bigger and beefier, hence the Nightstar was born. This thing didn't make it through the first Succession War. I think both the factories were destroyed, but then FedCom resurrected it later. And so the 9FC was built in 3057. So this thing clocks in at 1,929 battle value, which, at a first glance seems like a pretty good deal, but we'll see what Battlytics has to say about that. Movement is solid. It's a 4.6, so, a lot of these 95, 100-ton mechs, are in that 3.5 range. This one, real solid there at a 4.6. It can dissipate 26 points of heat per turn. It does have an XL fusion engine, though, which, you know how I feel about inner sphere XL fusion engines. They're a bit of a death trap. Everything else is standard structure, standard armor, so on and so forth. Speaking of armor, guys, 100% coverage, 18.5 tons on this thing. That is crazy for a 95-ton mech. This thing has pips for days. Again, excited to see how it survives. The armor may offset that XL fusion engine if you can keep them out long enough. Maybe this thing will have better survivability numbers, but we'll see. One weird thing about this mech is it has hand actuators. So if you look at the mech, it doesn't look like it has hands, but if you look real closely, it has like these little if you've ever seen Scary Movie, it's like, grab onto my strong hand. Like, it reminds me of that. Like these creepy little tiny disfigured hands. Anyway, I digress. So weaponry, let's talk about weapons. Aside from creepy hands that it can punch with, it also has in each arm an LB-10X, which I absolutely adore these weapons. In the Succession Wars era, AC-10, one of my favorite weapons in terms of bang for buck, the heat profile, the range profile. LB-10X takes it a step further because it bumps that range out to PPC quality, right? So you can shoot out to 18 hexes at long range, which is really good. Speaking of which, this thing also has an ER-PPC. That is mounted in the right torso, and those main guns are backed up by 3 medium lasers, 2 in each arm, and 1 in the head. I like the spread of weapons. I like where they're located. If you lose an arm, you still have a ton left. If you lose both arms, you still have good firepower in the ER-PPC and the medium laser, and as backup weapons, that's not too shabby. Ammo, we talked about this a little bit. LBX, it's packing 40 rounds. That's 4 tons of ammo in the left torso. In the default config, it's 20 slug, 20 cluster, and those are protected by case. But again, if that ammo pops, the mech's done, right? You've lost 3 engine criticals. So that sort of stinks, but I guess it's better than nothing. So let's take a look at the offensive benchmarks and see how much this thing can really shell out. All right, so I like what I see here. Some pretty good numbers, and you can see those numbers climb gradually as you get, into close range and those medium lasers come into play. But even still, once you're at, 12, 14 inch, like that range, it's doing some pretty decent damage. Over the 12 turns, it's doing 238.6 baseline damage. And to remind you what that means that the engine does not build up any more than 4 points of heat when it's calculating which weapons to fire. I set the cap at 4 for the baseline damage. Now, when we optimize it, it basically sees how much it can squeeze out of this mech. And again, gunnery penalties are serious business, so it typically saves that alpha strike for the end. When you do that, you can build up a little bit more heat. You can build up, a little bit more damage and a little bit more heat. So the damage is 244.2%. That's an increase of 2.3%. So nothing to write home about. And I think that story basically says, unless you're going to alpha strike and go all out to finish someone off, it's really not beneficial to gain, incremental heat over time. Just, run it cool, cycle your weapons as needed, and you'll do some pretty good damage here. Interestingly enough, if you try to push this mech and just alpha strike every turn as much as you can in this particular simulation, it basically only lost a few points of damage, right? So that heat comes on, but it's not building up a tremendous amount of heat. So pretty interesting. So maximum heat, over 12 turns, right? Alpha striking every single turn, assuming things are in range, it built up 18 points of heat. So that's really not bad. Let's take a look at the lethality, though. So the Javelin got pasted in this simulation, the Nightstar making short work of it. But what's great to see here is there's a couple things. Number one, the head kills, 21.2%. So the Javelin has 10 armor on the head, and that's intentional by design. You may not like it, but tough. So what we're looking for is, how many head caps you can get with weapons that do 10 or more damage. And that's, again, you've got the twin ACs and you've got that ERPPC. So it has 3 weapons. It sort of reminds me of the Banshee, which I believe is 2 PPCs and an AC-10, one of the Banshee variants at least. And just having those big weapons, just taking chunks of armor out of mechs, it's very lethal. It's very dangerous. Critical hits are average. It still has 6 weapons, so you have some opportunities to generate crits. The damage per hit is sort of in tune with what we were just talking about. 8.3 average damage per hit. That's really high. And then the time to kill the Javelin was 7.95. Average is about 10, so this is well below average on that. Not the best we've seen, but still very, very good. All right, so why don't we jump over to the defensive benchmarks and see how the survivability looks on this mech. Still questioning that XL engine and all that ammo just packed into that side torso, but let's see. The first thing we want to look at here is the armor diagnostic. So I love it. The one thing I actually love about this is it is exactly how I would armor a mech. You'll notice the rear is about at 75% of the capacity. And again, that's based on a normal 75-25 sort of percent of a percent, my apologies. But most mechs, if you look at them, especially the old Succession Wars era, like OG, Unseen's type mechs, most of them are a 75-25 split on front and rear. And so that's sort of the target, right? And so what you see here is it's a little over on the center and side torsos because it took a little bit away, like so I would take a little bit away from the rear too, especially on a mech like this. Like you really shouldn't be, really shouldn't get outflanked. You really shouldn't be in the city with this mech. This is an open field fighter, right? In my opinion, you've got tremendous range on this mech. The medium lasers are just to clean up trash or if things get close. So I love the way the armor is set up on this mech. If we look at the mobility analysis, what you'll see is almost no mobility hits. I mean, this thing has so much meat on its legs. The Awesome, which is the test mule firing on this thing in the defensive sim, again, that's 3 PPCs, 30 points every turn. It's barely getting into the legs, if ever. Over 10,000 simulations, 0.6% of those hits took out a leg actuator. So that means this mech is a reliable mover. That's important for objective capture games. That's important if you need it to get across the board, you know, into it to hold a critical spot or to support other mechs, whatever you need. You know, knowing you can rely on it to keep moving at full speed, highly valuable. So let's take a look at the survivability. I'm impressed, 90.9%. I'd have to actually go and look, but I feel like that's one of the highest numbers we've seen on a mech with an XL engine. You know, that's the kind of stuff you see with like a standard fusion engine, you know, like Wolverine with a higher TMM and things like that. So 90% is very, very good. 100% armor coverage. I'm not surprised, but I guess I sort of am. The engine deaths are not very high in and of themselves, 1.6%. But what you need to look there, the ammo deaths, 3.3%. So those deaths are occurring because it is taking out the engine. So more than half of the total deaths are caused by the engine or ammo or both, such as life. It takes a lot to core this thing out, and only 4.2% of those total deaths, right, are, you know, 4.2% of that 9.1%, I should say, are coming from CT or head deaths. And really, obviously, nothing you can do about head kills. It happens. Happens to the best of us. So what's also interesting is if you look at the right-hand side, the other metrics down there, the left leg, right leg slots. So that means how many of those critical slots, and there are 6, are filled out. In this mech, there's only 4 filled out. And even still, it's barely taking a loss in terms of mobility. So overall, I'm loving the design so far. I like the cost. I like the damage. I mean, the damage, again, we're talking, you know, 3057, like post, just post clan invasion era, pre-Civil War era. The tech is pretty good. I would like to see a little bit more damage on it, but I'm interested to see what the efficiency will be. I actually don't know. I haven't looked yet. So let's take a look and see if we're surprised. All right, here it is, popping up on our screen, 8.71. I'm happy with that. I would have expected, I was actually thinking it was going to be about an 8, because I didn't think the damage was high enough. But again, that 1900 BV, it just seems a little bit low. Like I compare it to, in my mind, I'm comparing it to like the Atlas K and some of these other mechs, which are about, I think the Atlas K is like 2100. And this thing's cheaper, and I think it's better. And the efficiency shows that. So 8.7 is a stellar number. That's definitely in sort of the elite class of mechs that you want to take. Just going through the numbers here, top left, let's look at that effectiveness graph. So the purple is your effective ACD. The blue area behind it is your optimized damage. So we only lost 3.6%, and that comes in very, very late game. You can see where the purple starts to separate from the blue. This is what you get. So you're only losing 3.6% of the damage, which is really good. So the net change from baseline is only 1.4%, because if you remember, we were able to pull the optimized up 2.3%. We lost 3.6, then that's 1.4 down. That's really, really good. So again, the efficiency, we're looking at 8.71. Gunnery sensitivity is actually a little bit on the higher side. Now, normally we see around a 0.5, a 0.7, 0.8, that's like really high. Of course, we have those wacky pulse clan mechs that are all pulse lasers that are, you know, close to negative or 0 gunnery sensitivity, but they're like a weird outlier case. This, a 0.6, this tells me that, yeah, put your good pilots in it. Don't put a skill 4 guy in it. Absolutely do not do that. It's worth it to put a gunnery 2 elite or veteran, or even, you know, if you're going up to gunnery 1, if you have your force commander. I mean, after all, from the lore perspective, that's what this mech was for. And it fits perfectly, right? If you put a gunnery 2 pilot in here, you're 871. At gunnery 1, you're at 9.18. The damage, if you look at the effective damage by gunnery in the bar chart at the bottom, it jumps up substantially, almost 50 points of damage between gunnery 2 and gunnery 1 over 12 turns, which is, you know, it's a lot. So pretty cool. Overall, very happy with how this mech showed in the charts here. It did in the benchmarks, really, really great. It's a mech, honestly, that I didn't even really pay any attention to until the Kickstarter came out, and Tom and I were going through the mechs, and I pulled out the Nightstar, and I was like, wow, this thing is freaking cool. And it's cool to see that it performs on the tabletop as well as it looks. So let's take a look at the threat assessment. Let's talk about roles. and then we'll wrap this thing up. All right, so here we are with the role evaluation and the threat assessment. So let's talk roles first. You know, I struggled with this one a little bit because you could realistically play this mech in a lot of different roles. The one I struggled with was Brawler. I almost had it as a Brawler, but then, you know, you do have the rear armor that you need to be concerned about. It can't arm flip, right? So it does have a bit of a blind spot in the back. And while 4.6 is respectable in terms of speed, you know, if you're in close and it's a scrum, you don't want to lose something this valuable with a bad move. So I actually said don't play it as a Brawler. That was and also, you know, you got minimum range on the ERPPC of the inner sphere variety at least. So I said no Brawler. It's the moral of the story. The two I picked were Defender and Vanguard. I'll talk about Vanguard first. So again, this mech has great speed. It can keep up with most inner sphere heavies of its time. You know, of course, there's a few that are, you know, the smaller ones are 5.8, and there's a few with juiced up engines and things like that. But, you know, when you think about your bread and butter, you know, Vanguard heavies, your Marauders, your Warhammers, right? Even if you move up to the assault class like Thug, Zeus, right? Some of these big tough mechs, they're all 4.6s. This thing can run with those. You can stay in a nice formation. You can move those mechs together up the board, and you can put this thing out front because it can weather a crap ton of fire, as we saw in the defensive simulation. It takes a lot to bring this mech down, and so I would not hesitate to put this out in the forefront and run it up the middle. Defender was the other thing I chose because, you know, again, let the enemy come to you. Let them just, you know, weather a hail of 30 points of damage per turn as they try to close in on an objective. You don't necessarily need to move this thing in close. The other role that I sort of thought about was almost like a skirmisher type role. I mean, it's a little big, it's a little slow, but hear me out on this one. You've got twin LB-10X with 40 rounds. That's 20 turns of sustained fire. And the ERPPC, you can fire basically everything except one medium laser and build up no heat. So you could float this thing out, you know, around 12 inches or so, even, you know, in at 9, so those medium lasers can come into play. And you can lay down a pretty substantial barrage. The peak alpha strike on this thing, 45 points. That's great. So if you're firing up to, you know, -1 medium laser, basically, you're at 42 points of heat. Not bad. I mean, I'm sorry, 42 points of damage is what I meant to say. It's not bad, and you're building up no heat. If you alpha strike, you only build up 3 points of heat per pull, right? It's not terrible. So in that sort of skirmisher role, back to that, I'm sort of all over the place here. So back to that skirmisher role, I do think you could play this thing, you know, sort of out on a flank, and I would do that if, you know, you're part of a bigger, slower assault lance where you have your Atlases and your Stalkers and your King Crabs and these 3.5 style mechs that are attracting more attention. People don't know what the Nightstar can do. You can get it out on a flank and really, you know, really do some damage. And you keep the enemy where you want them in terms of range rather than them, you know, risking them getting in your rear arc. That was my thought pattern there. I didn't put it down as an official checkbox there, you know, on the role evaluation, but something to consider in terms of play style. Anyway, looking at the general threat. So I mentioned this peak alpha strike of 45 points of damage. At 18 inches, you're doing 30 points of damage, right? It's absolutely brutal. You know, and again, the just the damage profile, the ERPPC can shoot further than the LBX, but I mean, once you're in that 18-inch ballpark, like it's pretty tremendous. All right, so moving on. The reason I'm stalling is because I think I said 42 points of damage -1 medium laser. I meant to say 40. I was thinking heat. I got heat and damage all confused tonight. So anyway. So once you get into 9 inches, right, you're doing 15 more points of damage because those medium lasers come into play. 5 per medium laser. Sorry about that. Anyway, so the one thing I do want to point out, though, is the ACD cap. It's very, very high, 83.3%. So what does that mean? That means if you roll the dice and you roll bang on average and you alpha strike, you're going to do 83.3% of your total damage, right? And that factors in the, you know, the probabilities of hitting and all this other stuff. So that ACD, right, that peak ACD happens at 3 inches, and it's 37.5 points of damage. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. So overall, what do I think about the Nightstar? I love it. I want to take it. I have one painted in my Winfield's Brigade colors, sort of the black and the green. So I want to use it. I want to get it on the table, and I want to make Tom's night miserable, or Dan's, depending on who decides to face me down. But it'll be good. I'm very excited. I have another one unpainted. Now I'm thinking about maybe I need to put it in Avatar Night's colors, since it's such a great mech. I'm not biased, I swear. So that's what I got. Nightstar is a must-have, in my opinion. If you haven't played it, play it. Try it on the table. And if you don't have the mini, guys, Aries Games and Minis, that's your one-stop shop for all things BattleTech. You can get the dice, the books, the novels, the minis, the paints. I was actually just talking to him about new Army Painter. I can't remember the name of them. They're like the new contrast paints that Army Painter came out. I heard amazing things about them. So they're going to be in stock over there. They like sold out almost immediately. But I want to get my hands on one of the big boxes very soon and try those out. So pretty excited for that. But Aries Games and Minis, guys, got all the good stuff that you want. Also, deathfromabovewargaming.com. Speaking of good stuff, guys, a lot of you ask me, hey, where's your downloads? Where do I get this? Where do I get that? Head over to our website. Everything is there. Now, if you're a patron, you get access to an exclusive set of downloads as well. And if you want to help out the channel, you want to get access to that stuff, you can head on over to Patreon. We have $1, $5, $10 tiers. You choose what works for you. But $1 a month is the minimum. That's all it takes to get in on the action. And that's it. So, guys, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to leave a like. Don't forget to leave a comment. Tell me how much you love and or hate the Nightstar. Interested to hear your perspective, as always. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.